everybody, welcome back to Eggs the Podcast. Today's special guest is founder and CEO of ZenCastr, Josh Nielsen. Josh, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thrilled to death to have you. This is actually one of these podcasts that has been a little while in the making. I think there's a couple times we've rescheduled with you, or there was a moment or two where we had moved dates around and things like that. I don't remember the whole history, but I know it's been a little bit of a match made in heaven. So I'm glad you finally are able to connect with us. Thanks for making time.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Why don't you give us a brief overview of how you got into founding ZenCastr? I know you were a software developer, a front-end guy for a long time. You want to give us just a quick breakdown of that and the start of ZenCastr?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, software engineer by trade. Kind of my first job out of university was working at a startup and kind of caught the startup bug. Before that point, I was, I just wasn't familiar with that world. And I got acquainted working at a startup in LA. It was a company called Mahalo. It was run by Jason Calacanis. And incidentally, he had a big podcast and was doing a lot of podcasting at the time. And I didn't know that was going to be sort of where I went in the future, but it was some good experience at the time. LA was too big for me. And so I quickly left after like 18 months, and I'd heard about Boulder, and this is like 2012, back when they were, kind of the heyday of the Boulder Techstars era, and got involved there. And again, just like really interested in startups and got to see all these other companies doing it, decided to do my own thing. And ZenCastr was sort of born out of the ashes of my first attempt at building a company.
Was that SoundKeep?
With a couple of good friends of mine. Yeah, SoundKeep. Okay. So it was basically the idea was to help electronic musicians collaborate, create music together online, and kind of like a GitHub for music sort of an idea.
Nice.
Which I didn't know at the time. There's a whole graveyard of different companies that have tried to do this at different times that failed, and it was hard to see them because they were all offline. But, their one company, Soundtrap, did end up kind of realizing that dream as well. So anyway, we didn't work out for us, but through building that, I learned a lot about what the capabilities were for the browsers as far as like dealing with audio, and that they were launching new stuff like almost monthly at that point. As we were building that, suddenly it became possible to access the microphone from the browser, from a web page essentially. And that sort of had all the pieces there that you needed for this problem in podcasting, which is 80+% of podcasters have a remote guest or a remote co-host. And if you just record a Skype or a Zoom call, it was mostly Skype back then, your guest is going to sound robotic or have dropouts, and it really annoys the brain of the listener when like one person sounds good and the other person has such poor quality. And so it was a really big problem in the space. And I realized that we could build something that made it so you could just send a link to whoever you wanted to record with, let they approve access to their microphone, and now you can record them locally in full quality. And then after the fact of the recording, mix those together. And so you get that same room sound. This was back before we even had video and before people were really interested in doing much video in podcasting. Obviously that has changed now. But yeah, that's sort of the origin story, I suppose, of what kind of led to that. I think the big key thing there is, just be curious. Like, we were building something totally different for totally different people, and someone came along and said, I don't know about musicians, but podcasters have this problem. And I actually sat on that for like 2 or 3 years and didn't do anything with it because we were building this different thing. It was after that kind of fell apart that I was like, hey, I wonder, maybe there's something there. Maybe I should have been more curious and kind of inquired more, and went out and talked to some podcasters. Sure enough, found out they had this big problem, and they were either not having guests because it was too hard to like train the guests to like open Audacity and like export an MP3 and send it over, is what they were trying to do, or they're having poor quality and then they're getting attacked on Twitter by their audience, which is not what you want as a podcaster.
It's funny because some of these things that you mentioned are things that we've dealt with. We've been doing this for almost 6 years now, Ryan, I think.
Yeah, I think we're into our 6th year.
in the early stages, we did that. We had them open a recording thing on their end and try and so if something did happen, we would have a backup, and we would record locally on our end, and we'd had 3 or 4 different things. And over the years, we've kind of been able to not have to do that anymore because technology's changed. It's great.
Well, and it's interesting too. I mean, I think in terms of like when ZenCastr started to come around, I mean, it was still really early in sort of mainstream podcasting. You know, there were people who were doing it already, you know, in other ways or maybe in person, almost like radio. But yeah, I mean, as we started our podcast, I mean, a lot of that tech wasn't really there yet, you know, and even to your point about browsers being able to ask for microphone access and stuff like that, like maybe if you'd have gotten started sooner, they may not have been able to even really support what you were trying to do. You know? So, I mean, I think that there is probably something, you know, some kismet around the timing, or at least that's what it seems like.
Certainly. If I would have tried to do it sooner, it would have been too early. And in fact, as I was building it, it took me about 6 months to put together the prototype. And it became possible as I was building that. And I just I didn't know how, I didn't realize that at the beginning. And I just got lucky that as I was building it, the browsers were launching the next pieces that I needed to actually kind of pull together a full prototype. But even then it was still pretty, they were changing the APIs all the time. And sometimes they would just make a change that's like, oh yeah, we just like broke
everything you did.
We just broke your business and maybe we'll fix it in like several months or whatever. And we've had to figure out how to get pretty creative with the browsers and use and abuse the different options to actually make it work well. Now it's stabilized, but you know, I ran it for almost 2 years as a side project that was not charging or anything, just to kind of get through some of that chop where it was there's just stability problems with the APIs that the browsers were pushing out.
Yeah, well, and I think that that's some of the stuff we experienced. So, I mean, you know, not to talk about the bad old days, but I mean, so we had you used ZenCastr early on, somewhere in the area of like, I don't know, episodes 15 or 20 or something like that. You know, I mean, really early for us. You know, 300 episodes ago. And you know, for us at the time, it was an innovative platform, and it solved a ton of the problems that we were trying to do. But, you know, to your point about APIs breaking the business and things like that, there were issues where, you know, we had time shifting and things like that that were causing issues for us. And then ultimately we ended up having to go another route. And so, but I mean, that was 2018. You know, I mean, we were like, this was forever ago. So the product that you've got now is infinitely more refined, and I mean, it's so much more powerful. But the things that you put into place in those early versions, you know, the ability to record locally and you know, and push to the cloud and all these other things that came along, I mean, they're very innovative in terms of this product development. We just happen to be have an intimate relationship with this kind of tech. But I mean, the things you were doing at the time you were doing them were revolutionary in our mind.
Yeah, no, thank you. It was, you know, we were the first mover to the space as far as like the browser-based recording stuff. There were some other apps that did it on mobile, or you had a desktop app that you would download. But as you guys probably know, the friction for that is really high for the guest, and it just didn't really work that well. But yeah, when I think it was like around Chrome, I think version 70, they just dropped an update, and it was like all of a sudden like 30+% of our recordings were out of sync, and like honestly, I thought that was the end of the business. I was like, okay, I don't know of a way to work around this. They've changed something under the hood that I don't have any control over, and there's no ETA on when that's going to not be that way. And yeah, I kind of, for a few weeks, I was just like, all right, I guess I'm just going to watch this thing topple over. But
did you see a significant loss in customers in that time frame?
You know, I think there was definitely some churn, but the company just kept growing anyway, which shocked me. And it just underlined how much of a problem we were solving. Even with the sync issues, it was still better. than like going back to Zoom or Skype or whatever. And
Well,
so
and that was the thing. I mean, we're lucky. I mean, Mike's background, if it's not obvious by all the audio equipment around his head, he, is an audio engineer. And so we were able to salvage most of the content that got shifted on us, right? So it wasn't that big a deal. And to your point earlier about video not really being a thing yet, we didn't have to worry about like lip syncing and getting all the content to line up just perfectly, right? We could just kind of shift the audio track over a little bit and solve that problem. So for us, it was still an effective tool, despite that. So I can understand why maybe the business was still growing. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if people who are outside of the podcasting world really understand the complexity that, we used to have, Mike on tech support basically for guests because he had to walk them through, software installation, or he had to walk them through, how to connect a mic to an interface or something so that we could work online. And ZenCastr solved all that stuff. So, I don't know. I've got nothing but praise for you. But anyway, it's just kind of it's funny how much easier life is these days. But those early days, man, that was a real challenge.
Yeah, and now what you're seeing is that tooling, the utility side of that remote recording or double-ended recording stuff is becoming pretty commoditized. There's a dozen or more kind of services out there that can do that pretty well for you now. And so we've had to say, that's a great place to start as a business, but that's not where we're stopping. And if you talk to podcasters, like, yeah, they had this real big problem recording remotely, but they got a lot of other problems that they need help with. You got to distribute it. You've got to edit it. You've got to figure out some sort of way to find and grow your audience. Most of them want to make money somehow. And so that's what we've expanded out to outside of just being a recording utility, is sort of a workflow and a tool chain that helps you with all of the different hurdles you're going to face as a podcaster of all different sizes. When you're small, you're not so worried about monetization. It's more about getting the tooling done. And when you're big, you've kind of moved past all of that and thinking more big picture. And we've tried to have a good spot for everybody at ZenCastr. It's been fun.
You've actually implemented some ways that smaller podcasts can actually monetize. Do you want to talk about that? I've seen some posts on your LinkedIn about that, and it's kind of intriguing to me.
Yeah. As you guys know, most podcasters are pretty entrepreneurial. They, want to either monetize their audience, or they've got a tool or a service on the side that they're driving traffic to. But, it used to be that if you wanted to monetize as a smaller podcaster, even if you've got 5,000 or 10,000 monthly downloads, most of these networks and platforms just aren't gonna deal with you. And we were like, that sucks. Like, that's not how YouTube is. I think they have a minimum threshold, but it's quite low. And really, you shouldn't have to wait for some network to pick you up for you to be able to have that chance at breakout success and finding and accomplishing the goals. And so we sort of look at what we're building now is sort of a podcast network for everybody in the sense that what podcast networks do is they cross promote you with other similar shows so that you have audience growth built in, like the Archaeology Podcast Network or the Historians Podcast Network, whatever it is. And then they also go out, help you find monetization options. Oftentimes they'll provide you with the tool set that you need or access to the tool set that you need to create high quality content. And, we can do all of that through ZenCastr. And that's a lot of what we're working on now is, taking our tens of thousands of creators, topic modeling what they're talking about so that we can say, hey, you guys talk about all the same things as this podcast over here. You should do an ad swap, or you should do a guest swap, or you should be on, cross promote somehow to get access to their audience and for them to yours, fulfilling that need, that service that these individual networks are providing, but we can do it across any sort of topics or heuristics, of the creators. And so, but to answer your question, yeah, something that really works for small creators as well as big. What we found is that the small creators, yeah, they're interested in monetization. Yeah, we can set them up with programmatic ads. No, you're not going to make a ton of money if you've got 500 monthly downloads. What you got to be doing is focus on audience growth first. And I think we actually kind of got out of step a little bit as a business by jumping to monetization before we'd really cracked the nut on how do we have a good repeatable model for podcast growth. And so that's because we're able to help the big podcasters monetize, but that still doesn't accomplish that goal of, this network for everybody and everybody should have access. And so now we're sort of looking at growth options. And this is why we've launched our clipping tool. Really podcasting, you have to tap into the growth algorithms of other platforms in order to grow your podcast. You can't just publish an episode on the RSS feed and expect for people to find it or for somebody to go out and like suggest it to people.
It's funny because we did that for like the first 4 years. Maybe we're just going to publish it on the RSS feed. It'll grow naturally. And you're right.
And to some extent it has. But to your point, Josh, I mean, obviously we have to push the show on social media. We have to take advantage of these tools. And so, but one of the things that you mentioned there that I think is probably really powerful, and I'd like to talk about sort of from two angles. One is identifying it as a business need, but two, how podcasts can go about taking advantage of it. And it is those cross-promotional tools. So in the early days of podcasting, that was a big way for shows like ours to grow, and other things like that is, one or the other of us would go appear as a guest on somebody else's show. Or I remember we did a couple what we called co-shows, where we had another podcast guest on our show and we'd publish the same show on both feeds, and so we'd do some of that kind of stuff where we were doing these little cross-promotional things. So more than just a simple monetization platform, well, I say simple like it's easy. I mean, obviously it's a complex monetization platform, but the business insight that you had, which was, okay, well, monetization is great and it's obviously what every podcaster is asking for, but the reality is it really is about the show growth. The monetization will come.
Yep.
And so the fact that you recognize that and we're able to sort of start to build tools around that, or maybe that's where you are presently, is building tools around that. I'd like to maybe talk a little bit more, or sort of explore more deeply that idea of sort of identifying that business need and then the actions that ZenCastr is taking to do that. Because I think for me anyway, and obviously we're on the outside of the company, our view would be, oh, well, you're constantly improving the software or whatever, right? But this concept of helping people grow their shows is a little bit out of scope, or it's a little bit outside of what maybe a company that's just a recording platform would be doing. But I guess, I don't know, if, as a person in the podcasting community, this seems like something you're doing to give back to the podcast, even if it is something you pay for. And even if it is that, I mean, it seems like it's something that's actually helping grow the medium. And so I wonder if you talk a little bit about that. I know it's kind of a big question or a broad question, but if we can talk about sort of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say that, we're just like blessed with like insight for the future of the space and what it needs. But honestly, it's just about listening to the customers. But to the point I think you're kind of making, it's sort of like, what's the Henry Ford quote? If I asked my customers what they wanted, they'd ask for a faster horse.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's sort of the same thing in podcasting. They're asking for something they just like, I want to make money. And so we thought, okay, well, let's help these guys monetize. But it took some experience to realize that you're really only going to effectively help the people who already figured it out if you don't help them grow first. And a lot of podcasters I don't know are necessarily tuned into that as well, because if you've never monetized before, you may not even know like what the value of your show and your audience is, and you may think it's way bigger than it might, so I think that's a part of our goal as a company. Is a lot of people that are getting new into podcasting they've never done this before, potentially maybe don't know what they don't know about it, and are really looking for some a platform or network or service to say, let us show you the way. Like, we know how to do this. Just trust us. Trust the platform and the method that we're putting in front of you, and go that way. And that's just, I guess, an onboarding and engagement thing. We've always been not great at that. We were a little bit spoiled in the beginning, being, the only option and one of the only options for a long time. And now we've had to say, okay, like, let's actually polish up a lot of the kind of the rough edges around this thing and make it, not only really functional, but really easy and delightful to use, and something that is not, confounding until you like figure it out. Which is, not necessarily an easy task, but I think is, something we're pretty heavy into right now, is just like revamping the whole onboarding, making it totally clear, like not just pushing a bunch of tools at you, but saying like, okay, here's what you need to do. Use this tool to do that. Now let's do this piece. Let's do that. And kind of threading that needle is a lot of what we're thinking about now. I forgot what the original question was. I just rambled on.
No, that's okay. No, like I was saying, I think it's very interesting that you're going into something that's sort of indirectly valuable to podcasters. I mean, obviously it's something that you can build tools around and sort of monetize in your own business. So, I mean, there's clearly business objectives around it. But I think it's a blind spot for some of these other platforms who just see themselves as a platform for recording podcasts, or for distribution or for whatever. But that's what they see their platform as being, where it seems to me that the way you're expanding ZenCastr isn't so much just in the hard services, the things that are expected, the ability to record, the ability to do video, the ability to do the commoditized functions like you're talking about. Mm-hmm. But this expansion into, actually helping people grow their shows so that they can actually make money with it. I don't know. It just seems like with other platforms I've seen, that seems to be a blind spot that people are missing, or maybe they don't have a big enough community to get into it, or whatever reason they don't. But it just seems like a blind spot for them.
Yeah, I think it's so much of the hardest piece of launching a business is getting that initial product market fit. Once you hit that point, you're going to be actually deluged in feedback, like way more feedback and like from users than you know what to do with. And it's so you kind of know what people want and need, especially if you're reading between the lines. The hard part, I think, is sequence. What is the right order in which to roll this out so that we're providing additive value with each step while working towards this much bigger goal, and not ending up in a situation where you're building out something that's got such a long timeline and you're not adding any value in between, and then you've made this big bet. This kind of happened to us with the monetization side. Make this big bet, and then there's a bunch of surprises on how that business works and how to make it ramp it up. And so that's kind of the lesson I learned is if you have that product market fit, you're gonna have a lot of ideas of what to do. It's figuring out how and when to do them in the right order.
Yeah. Let's actually, you just mentioned, lessons learned kind of thing. And I'm sure over the course of, has it been 7-8 years now that you've been running ZenCastr, you've had a lot of those lessons learned, like probably from day one when you launched to, next step. And then here comes COVID, like everyone goes to some sort of a platform, whether it be Zoom or ZenCastr or another one, just to work. Can you maybe talk about A, the effects of COVID on your business, and B, growth pains? How did you make those decisions? And as a founder, that all of those decisions are on you, and now you've got to hire people, you've got to fire people, you've got a pandemic that came along and changed everything. It has to have been a really crazy ride for you. Maybe are there some highlights you can point out to us?
Yeah, maybe let's talk about the growing pains first, and then come to COVID, because at least in our company, those were at two really different times. We were hitting growing pains from, I started this business not thinking it was going to be like a high scale startup sort of a thing. It was a lifestyle business. Someone told me they'd pay me $20 a month if I built this thing. Podcasting was not a hot space at the time. That just kind of happened as I was building the product. And so, my goals for the company was to, be financially independent. I also wanted to be geographically independent because my wife's from New Zealand and she wanted to had a baby on the way and she wanted to go home for that. And like, nobody wanted to hire me if I was going to go to New Zealand at like complete opposite time zones. And, so it was very, small. The ambition was not huge at the beginning, but then people started using it and suddenly we got thousands of people using this platform. I'm still solo. I'm doing customer support. I'm doing engineering, product, the design as well. If you guys remember back then, the design was, it's a lot better now that we've got a designer. And so, but that's kind of what I thought I wanted, was like this solopreneur kind of business, but it just got out of hand. Like it just got too big for me. And I waited too long, I think, to figure out that like, not only are you're having more stress and probably hurting your customer experience more by not growing the business than if the stress of growing the business. Because I've never really wanted to be like managing people and, doing admin type stuff. That's not what gets me out of bed in the morning. And in the end, the solution to that problem was to hire a co-founder who's actually good at some of that stuff. And then also raising some money so that we could build out a team.
So how did you know the co-founder initially beforehand, or did you meet him after you had been going and just figured he'd be a good fit?
No, I knew him beforehand. When the business started taking off, you get a lot of people reaching out and they're like, "Hey, I'm a marketer and I can see that you're not doing marketing. Would you like to because we were all just word of mouth growth for most of the history of the business. And but I was always like, yeah, you could probably help me, but like I'm living in Thailand and you're in New York City and I don't know how to get to know you and I don't trust you yet. And there was just I knew I needed help or could use it, but I never saw a path to like building the relationship that you would need at that time. But to your question, my co-founder, he was actually at the same company in Los Angeles that I was. And we became really good friends back then. And so it was just an acquaintance, or it was just an acquaintance I had met then, and we stayed friends and stayed in touch. He went to a bunch of startups. He became part of the founding team of a company called Flipagram. They got bought by ByteDance and turned into what became TikTok.
Oh, wow.
And so he had a real wealth of experience on like how you take a user-generated content business, grow it through product-led growth. They were the fastest growing app in the App Store ever, I think, at one point. And then, they were funded and all of this stuff. So I brought him on as sort of help me like build up the business to where it just needs to be to support now, and then help me figure out what the future of the business is. Because that time we were purely recording. We didn't even record. It was in purely audio recording. Didn't have video, no mobile support, none of that. And so he came on, Adrian Lopez, and we basically built out the rest of what we've got today. And some of that so that was just really helpful, from taking the load off of my plate on like just like management of people and growing the business, hiring good people. But also now I had somebody I could bounce ideas off of, which is good. When you're totally siloed and you don't have anybody else in the business, you can head in the wrong direction for a long time before you really get level set. And so that was another good aspect of that, and just being able to take that leap forward of raising money, going big, putting a lot of risk on the table, but a lot of potential reward as well, and doing it with confidence. So I'm a big fan of, as someone who was probably against the idea of co-founders when I started, I definitely came around. And I think that was born out of some experiences I had in previous projects where, and again, this is pre-product market fit. And when you're pre-product market fit, you're kind of like you're like a ship out of the ocean with no wind, and it's hard to know how to solve that problem. And there was a situation before we had like 3 co-founders not hitting product market fit, not agreeing on what the next thing is that we need to do to change that. And we ended up kind of just compromising into something that nobody liked. And so I wanted to avoid that, but also found after you hit product market fit, man, you really need help building a business and growing it, especially if you're socially challenged like me, I guess.
Well, that was actually something I wanted to get into, just to kind of extend this bit of the conversation was, I mean, you started out as a front-end web developer, but then you became business leader, CEOs, all these things, right? And I think that there's sort of this view that people have when they look at people who are in a good position in business at this point, and they go, oh, well, they must have had some help, or they must have always been good at business, or they must have always been whatever. And so, and I don't know if this is your situation exactly, but you kind of hinted to it, is that, a lot of front-end developers and web developers in general aren't particularly social creatures. And there's a big part of that you kind of have to flip if you're going to be a business leader. And so I wonder if you'd talk about your experience a little bit in making the transition into leadership versus, from the solo operation where you got to just do what you wanted, which was front-end development, to, well, now I have to lead a company. And if there are any sort of, I don't know, key takeaways along the way into making that transition, because I think so many people feel like they're just left behind, or I can't get there, or that's not for me because it's not what I am. And I think that the reality is that nobody really knows, and we kind of all grow into it. So I wonder if you wouldn't just maybe share your experience.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely a really hard transition, and was something that I put off for a long time because I feared that transition. And I don't know that I've my solution to the problem has been create a business where I can run it from my home. I don't have to be around people all the time. I can go out and be social like this, I most of the marketing that we're doing right now is just podcast touring and going around and talking to people. And that's something that is easy for me to do from the comfort of my desk. And, I can, mute myself to cough or whatever. You can sort of really control your presence, I suppose. And that makes it easier for me. I am not when we go to conferences, everybody's like, oh, well, you should apply to speak. I'm like, I'm not trying to speak at a conference. I'll do a webinar or whatever. But yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know if I think just what you said is true. If you don't really know it till you've done it. And if you're confident before you've done it, then that's just a lot of hubris, really. If you're honest with yourself, probably. I mean, I guess there's people that are naturally talented at that sort of thing, but if you're not one of those people, it takes exercise, and also just know when you're not good at something and hire somebody who's better in a lot of cases. But some things you can't. As a CEO, you can't hire out a lot of that top level stuff, and so you just have to say okay, I'm gonna have to figure out how to at least be serviceable at what I'm trying to do, fundraising, for instance. You can't hire someone. Well, I guess you can, but I don't know how successful it would be. I don't think VCs like to be pitched by someone the company hired. But sometimes you just got to figure it out, and it's just one step at a time. It all feels, it just takes time, and so not everybody has the time too. I mean, we were lucky in that we had, profitable from the first month we started charging until we raised money and made some, decisions just, to go into burn to grow faster. But yeah, don't be afraid to even before you get to the marketing side, you got to be able to read books. I mean, and say okay, I need to learn a new skill now. Let's go read some books, listen to some podcasts, and figure it out, do the best I can. And maybe I'll be great at it, maybe not, but you're not going to figure it out.
What book was that, by the way?
This is Blitz Scaling, Reid Hoffman and Chris Ye.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm always on the hunt for another one, so I appreciate that.
Well, this is a good one. It's about, and I'm not all the way through it. I'm actually just using this for reference. They have a course they did a set of courses through Stanford that you can watch on YouTube where they go into depth on all of this. But it's basically about how do you build a business in a fast way with like VC money that ensures that you're building a moat around it as well at the same time, and like figuring out how to like basically figure out what type of network effects you can employ in your business and how to get to that point and build a good moat with that strategy.
Nice.
Well, and maybe that gives us another kind of tipping off point or something to talk about, which is fundraising. I know for a lot of people, there's, the idea of fundraising is a simple one, which is, I need some money to scale. I'm going to go look for money. But the reality is there's lots of different ways to raise money. Some are better than others. There's pros and cons to every, decision you're making. Can you talk a little bit about, and you don't have to be super prescriptive. Feel free to obfuscate whatever you need to, but the kinds of decisions that you were going through as you were trying to scale your business, trying to make the decision, okay, well, now is the time we need money versus why not 6 months earlier or 6 months later? Like, why is now the time we need money? And, just sort of what you went through to get money, maybe the route you went, that kind of thing.
Well, fundraising can be really complicated or it can be really simple. And when it gets really simple, it's when you're just putting up undeniable numbers that you're not having to really, if you're having double digit month over month growth and you're in a hot space that's got a big TAM, probably not going to have that much trouble raising money. It's when you don't check all those boxes that then you're trying to like be really nuanced about your vision and trying to really sell on the people rather than just selling the business, I guess. And this actually links into a question you asked earlier that we never got back to, was COVID. That's sure. Actually what we were under. I think, we were close to 10% month over month growth. I can't remember exactly now, maybe like 6-7%, which is like doubling every year. Not bad, but it wasn't like, ooh, got to get, it was like, that's interesting, but podcasting at the time, nobody really knew. Like, people thought it was going to be big, but it was sort of like, nobody had like a fund thesis, like where their main thesis is around podcasting or something. They'll have like, we've got an AI thesis and got this B2B enterprise thing we're doing. Podcasting was sort of like a novelty idea or a fun spend on the side for these guys. And but then once COVID hit, then we started seeing months where we had like 30+% month over month growth. Wow. And that's when we were like, because I think the year before we had tested the waters just a little bit with a few different people on fundraising, and just it wasn't landing well. And we thought, okay, well, we're profitable. We don't necessarily need to do this right now. Once COVID hit and we saw, wow, now we're putting up numbers that are really going to get excitement from venture capital. And so that's when we went out and actually raised our seed round. We were already profitable and had like an ARR of like $1 million a year or something. So we were kind of bigger than most seed stage companies, but not like Series A ready either. But we were still able to put something together that was pretty favorable for us, just given the ecosystem around COVID. So COVID ended up being a real boon for the business.
In your case, then, was it like a scaling issue you were trying to catch, which is we need more infrastructure, we need more whatever, so that we can keep up with the new demand? Or was there a specific problem you were trying to solve with the fundraising?
Yep. So the goal was to go from being a recording utility to building out what, a full service, all-in-one solution for podcasters, but also, and then network them together. And that's sort of what we're in the process of now, is that sort of that second piece. So I think we raised like $4.5 million at the time. And that took us from being just recording, we'd already had video. So we're recording an audio and video. That was another thing that we used to raise off of, is we put a wait list out for our video product. Ever since the beginning, the two top requests were, I want this on mobile and I want to be able to do video. And so we knew there was a high demand for that, put up a waiting list. I don't remember. We got 50,000 pre-signups for people saying they wanted to be in for video, somewhere in that range. And so that was another thing that was like, we got a lot of pent up demand. And that was able to get us some good excitement on the VC side as well.
Well, what were some hurdles that you had to overcome to add the video functionality to it? I'm sure you had the audio kind of dialed in, but then now you have this other component you have to add to it. Is it just a matter of putting an MP4 on an MP3? Not necessarily, but you know what I mean.
Yes and no. I mean, one of the struggles is, obviously video encoding stresses the system out more than audio,
Sure.
much bigger file sizes. So like people that have old computers or small hard drives or not a lot of RAM, that put more stress on that side of things. But we ended up hiring, this wizard of I don't know what you would call him, audio video engineer. He's very multi-talented, but he came from Viber and just had a lot of experience with this stuff. Really good with understanding the browser's capabilities. Also knows like C and can dive down deep. And now there's like WebAssembly and stuff that you can do that we're using. And so, yeah, made a good hire. Really was the answer to that problem. At that point, I wasn't. As soon as we started fundraising, that kind of pulled me finally out of being an engineer at all. That was just too much time and work, and I was taking tickets and not finishing them in time and just holding up the process. And these guys are way better than me anyway.
Did you, when you initially built your first prototype, you used a tech stack that you were probably familiar with and you'd worked with audio before in the past. When you went to implement the video, did you have to change your tech stack and maybe rebuild the whole platform from the ground up, or were you able to kind of use what you had and build on top of it?
So we would love to rewrite everything that I did, but there's a huge amount of work that goes into that. We have switched stacks. I built the original recording app basically using JavaScript and a framework called Backbone, and which now is like a very old, but it's quite simple, and so it's not like so much of an albatross, but it also doesn't. It's harder to test easily, and it's easier to make. It doesn't hold your hand and protect you from a lot of the mistakes that you can make. Like now people are using React and Redux and all these fancy tools that solve a lot of those problems that you can get into by just having an opinionated way to do it. But we still use that original app that I wrote with heavy modifications and updates that the engineers have put in there. One day we'll rewrite the whole thing, but it actually, it's been road tested for so long that it's one of those things where it might just be okay to leave it until we really feel like this is hampering our abilities to build out new product, which it kind of is sometimes, but not to the degree yet that it would make sense to like commit the dev team for 6 months just on this and not do anything that ostensibly the end user wouldn't even notice, if you did it right. That's a hard call to make, but the rest of the app and all the new stuff that we're building around it is in all the new frameworks. And one of these days we'll come back and get back to it.
Well, and is that just kind of, I don't know, dumb luck, for lack of a better term? Like, I mean, were you thinking back then when you were first scoping this thing out that like how to future-proof this thing and how to keep the application running forever? Or did you just happen to choose languages that worked and built out a platform that just happens to be infinitely build-onable?
I mean, I'd like to think I made some okay decisions at the beginning. I made a lot of poor decisions as well. It's been good enough, and I guess to answer your question, I definitely did. When you're the only guy building it and doing customer support, you do just have to cut corners. Like if you're gonna get to where you need to go in any amount of time, you do have to cut corners. So there's still some of those corners that have been cut and left in there, but all of the real critical stuff, like, recording safety and recording backups, like we've got multiple stages of redundancy built around that. In case somebody's like computer gets struck by lightning during your call, you still got like a backup in the cloud even. And so, yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm like say to myself, wow, that's like, you should be proud. Like the code you wrote is like still chugging along and still doing its job. But at the same time, it would be nice to just have it all fresh. But it's tough to allocate the time with the size of the team that we have right now.
Yeah.
If we did an A round, raise a bunch of money, and doubled the size of our team, then we could probably sneak something like that in. But not there yet.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It's hard to, like, I went through boot camp. I've been studying software development for a long time, and just figuring out what tech stack you want to use is one of the hardest things. Should I do it in Python? Should I do it in JavaScript? Should I use React? Should I use Next.js? Where am I going to host this? How much are they going to charge me? How much is it going to cost when people actually use the app? And so it's like the free tier is great until you get this huge bill. And so a lot of those decisions just have to be, just kind of go with it and hope that you don't get $1 million bill for your hosting fee when it actually, that had to be. Did you have those pains? Did you have the huge server fees that you weren't expecting, that all of a sudden, now what do I do?
Early on, not so much, because we had it it was easier to predict when it was a lot simpler. Now that we've added like audio and video post productions and clipping and all of this stuff, there's some ways that it can kind of run away with itself if you're not careful. We've got a pretty competent head of engineering who keeps makes sure we're putting like safeguards, so we don't, like, for instance, like on our hosting side, if we offer free hosting, but like, for instance, what if one of them blew up and started getting millions of downloads per episode somehow? Yeah. That could happen, feasibly. How do we deal with that? And so we've got checks in place. It's more of a worry now, just like it's not so much unpredictable as it is just like we've added a lot more things that cost more behind the scenes. Are you without
talking about like the AI capability for clipping? Is that what you're referring to right there?
That's another one. There's a cost involved there for running, like we use ChatGPT for some of that stuff, and then also just the, building out the piece of content on the back end. So there's, we're running at less of a margin now because we've added a lot of things that add value but also cost without necessarily raising prices. And we are trying to figure out the balance of putting those into higher tiered plans and whatever. But luckily so far we've never been hit with like a crazy bill we couldn't pay. But I just read an article the other day where some guy was like, I think it was on Netlify or something. He had a homepage there and it had an MP3 that it was hosting.
Yeah.
And he ended up with like $100,000 bill. Just didn't even realize it. And it was like
out
from
of the
bots
blue,
too.
He wakes up and it's like on a free tier, and the next thing he knows, he owes him $100,000. And Cloudflare could have probably solved that, but yeah.
No, that's funny. So one of the things you talked about as having saved your business and or at least certainly helped your business along the way was hiring a good person. And I wonder if you can talk about, from a business leadership standpoint, you talked about, starting to append co-founders and things like that and how you started to grow that way. But can you talk a little bit about hiring person one and some of the trials that you may have gone through in trying to hire the right people? And then also, maybe some of the success stories, like how, finding the right people for, to get sort of that cultural fit, the technology fit, all the different parts. Do you have any guidance around hiring?
Well, I can say that what you want to look for is somebody that is significantly better than you at what you need them to do. If at all possible, if you have to, because then it changes the dynamic of, if I'm hiring somebody and I'm going to have to train them up into something that I'm doing now, I'm going to think I'm better than them at it. It's going to be hard for me to let go of the reins. I may not trust that they're going to do it as well as I could. And so I'm going to want to micromanage. Whereas if I hire somebody, then I'm like, wow, you're obviously better than me at this. So then you can just like, as long as you choose properly, you can like let go of it and it feels so much better. And you're like, I don't even want to touch it because I would mess it up. This is your thing now, That's the way, at least I think, to have peace of mind when you're growing the business and not be super worried about who's doing what and who's sitting in their chair at what time and all that sort of a thing. Um, but that's not hard, that's not necessarily easy to do, or to find. And I brought on, when you asked about the first employee, his name is Andre. He's a Romanian guy, and he actually reached out to me. Indie Hackers interviewed me, and he read a post on Indie Hackers, and this was when I was, talking about how we had like 15K in MRR or something. It was very early on, and he just reached out and was like, "Hey, I have my own project that deals with a lot of the same technology. Do you need some help?" And I was like, "Oh, if you already dealing with web audio and Canvas and a lot of the stuff we're dealing with, like, that's great. Come on." And so the first few people that I hired actually were people that just hit me up and were like, "Hey, it looks like you could use some help. Do you want some help?" I was like, "Yeah, come on over." But once I brought on my co-founder, who we had just stayed in touch, and he had seen what the business was doing. As I mentioned, he was really well prepared to take to the next stage. When I brought him on was when we really started like putting out real job posts and like going through lots of resumes and then really building out the team.
Did you find that you had any trouble? I mean, I think you make a really great point. And you hear advice like this, which is, hire people who are better than you are. And you mentioned at some point you were able to sort of step away from the programming side because you did make a good hire. Did you have any problem with that, just making that transition or sort of pivoting into just, okay, well, I guess now I'm just a leader. I'm not doing the work anymore. Was that a struggle?
Do you pull down the code and review it just for fun?
It's probably, I don't think I've got a fresh, it'd be funny to look and see what my version is of the code I've got on my computer. It would be old. Is that hard? I was happy to have the help, and I'm happy to have people that are so great helping. What is hard is like, in the early days, I used to get excited for the weekends because customer support would calm way down. And I'm like, okay, now I get to program all weekend. And then I run the business during the week. I was getting most of the programming done during the weekend because it was too hard during the week to juggle context like that. And so I guess I just like, that's fun to me. Like, sit down and have like a full day to like focus on a programming problem and to be able to see. And this is why I like to do front end work, because you're seeing not only the logic coming together, but the interface, and you're building something that does something. And it's really like a quick feedback loop of like, just, I don't know, personal validation, I guess. But, I don't get that same thing out of like a lot of the day-to-day of not being in the code. Podcasting, I mean, I really enjoy, going out there and just chatting with people like this. This is fun. So I enjoy the days that I have the podcast scheduled. I really still do enjoy like the product and design meetings. That's a lot of where I spend my time now is with the designers and the product guys, figuring out like what's not only what do we need to build next, but how do we fix and uncut some of the corners that we cut early on, to where, we're building a real like workflow tailored well to the creator's needs, as opposed to just a feature dump. So it wasn't an easy transition, but there's still other fun things that I find. But yeah, I do sometimes. I'm feeling it more and more these days. For a while, I was like kind of burned out with having just the responsibility of the code, and so it was okay to take a step away. Now I'm starting to feel that inkling of maybe I need to start a side project or something to kind of keep my skills fresh and still feed that need I've got to build something like playing with Legos, I guess.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, hey, Josh, as we're starting to get here to the end of the show, I wonder if you just want to take a quick minute, let people know how they can connect with you if they want to learn more about the ZenCastr platform, or if they want to contact you directly, how they might do that.
Yeah, I am Josh at ZenCastr.com. Obviously, you can also just go to ZenCastr.com and check out our product offering. And then on Twitter or X, we are ZenCastr with no E between the T and the R. And yeah, those are the main platforms. I also tend to hang around in the podcasting subreddit. So that's sort of the social channel I like to hang out on.
Nice.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks so much, Josh. We really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, really appreciate
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. We'll see you guys next time.